This is Brent with Lykins Motorsports. I think we're on part 5 of this 496 FE. And the trend push rods came in that I ordered. So we're going to try to make some headway there. I got those installed, got them washed. Make sure you wash all your push rods on the inside and outside. They get kind of cruddy on the inside. And when you bolt your rocker arms down for the first time, try to find a place where you can park the engine to where all the valves are closed or almost closed. On an FE, there's a spot where most of the valves are shut. Just a couple of valves are starting to open. But you want to do that so you don't load your shaft in a certain spot. And you also want to go just a quarter turn at a time on your nuts when you tighten those down. I've heard of guys just zonking, the nuts down. They may be in a position where one lifter is up or something. And I've heard of people breaking rocker shafts that way. So just take your time and, ease down on it. Got the intake manifold on temporarily, and I can tell that it's centered by looking down the port, looking down the plenum at the ports with my scope, and also looking at the distributor seal all the way around, so I got an even gap. But what I'm going to do is roll this engine over, and I like to check it with the valve open and with the valve shut, and just make sure that we've got some clearance around the push rod in each tube. And I'm not going to bore you with doing that, but it's a pretty simple procedure. Just roll the engine over and check it. And if you think you're pretty close, what I've done in the past is wrapped a piece of paper around the push rod, and then you can just slide it up and down the push rod to see if it touches anywhere, to see if you need to grind anywhere. Typically, you don't have any trouble with 5/16 push rods. And it's when you start getting into the 3/8 and the 7/16 that things get a little hairy. So I'm gonna roll through and check all the holes and make sure we're not having any problems, and we'll get back. All right, so I got all my push rod tube clearance checked, and the intake is back off and the rockers are back off. Just wanted to take a quick second and show you when you roll the engine over, it does leave a little bit of a pattern. And I just wanted to show you how thin and how well the geometry is set up. I love seeing that. So what I'm gonna do now, I'm gonna roll through here and check all these lifter cups and make sure that they have all returned back up against the circlip. And then I'm gonna put the rocker arms back on with the push rods without the intake, and prime the oil pump and make sure that I get oil to all the rockers, and also check, I'm gonna eyeball my lifter preload on each lifter, just to double check myself before putting the intake on. So give me a few minutes to get set up and I'll be right back. Okay, I went through and checked all to make sure all the plungers have popped back up, and then I have reinstalled everything. I have the push rods and the rockers back on without the intake on, so I can see what's going on. And putting the rocker arms on with the push rods like this is kind of like herding cats. It'll test your patience, and you'll want to find easier things to do. But in my mind, it's an extra checking step that I do. I guess once upon a time I got burned by something that I didn't catch with the intake on or whatever, but this is what I do. This is how I do it from here on out. So so I've got everything ready to prime the oil pump, and I would suggest putting a couple of shop towels in the bottom here, because the valve cover rail isn't too far from where the oil is going to drip out, and it'll end up all the way down the side of your block and on your oil pan and everything. So let's got my priming tool here, and let's give it some gas. Yeah, this is why you put paper towels up. I'm still making a mess on the floor. Hold on a second, I'm gonna grab a shop towel. I don't like oil on my floor. And I don't like oil down my block and my heads either, so I'm gonna clean this up. So that's the gist of it. And another thing I do is I go through, and while everything's preloaded the way it's supposed to be, I will go and look at each individual lifter and just eyeball the preload and make sure that, you know, I didn't really mess up something bad. You know, the plunger isn't up against the circlip or it's not bottomed out. And you kind of learn to make tools. And this is just a paper clip. It's about 45 thousandths thick, and I got a little hook on it. And I could put it down in there, and I could get underneath that circlip and feel between the clip and the bottom, or I'm sorry, the top of the plunger, and kind of get a feel for how much preload I got. But that's what I like to do. Well, let's see. So I'm gonna roll the engine over to make sure that we're cycling oil to everywhere that it needs to go. And I'm gonna keep priming a little bit. And that's the gist of that. So you'll want to just keep rolling the engine over, because the way the lifters are positioned in the bore and everything, it's kind of relative to how much oil it gets. And, you know, a valve that's open and a lifter that's up may not get the same amount of oil as one that's on the heel of the cam lobe. So just roll the engine over and make sure you get oil to all the rocker arms. Just double check yourself. And I'll go through and check all 16 and make sure that they're right. And let's see, what will our next step be? Oh, I just want to point out these nice drains. One of the viewers on one of the other videos pointed out that there's the drains in the lifter valley aren't shaped correctly, but you know, all the edges are broke, and it's got a really nice lead down through there, so oil just runs right through there. Things don't need to be polished and smooth as silk or anything like that. I haven't seen where that is any advantage. Okay, so yeah, we're ready to put the intake on. So let me get everything back off, and we'll probably spend quite a few minutes talking about how to put the intake manifold on, because it can be a bear dog sometimes. All right, I'll be back with you. All right, I just want to pop back on here just real quick and show that all the rocker arms are oiling. This guy right here was a late bloomer, but he eventually started dripping. So that one got oil there. There. Continuing to make a mess on this side, but oil to all the rockers. Good deal. Okay, so in preparation for intake installation, you want to make sure that these tabs aren't sticking up on your head gasket, and those aren't impeding the way that the intake sits. And I'm going to go ahead and clean off the head flange and put just a light paint thin coat of silicone around the ports, the water jackets, and I usually come around this oil drain on both sides. And I'm going to glue my intake gaskets on, and then I'm just going to sit the intake on it and then let it set overnight. It's getting in the evening here, and I'll let that set up overnight. Just a quick shot of the intake gaskets glued on. These are Mr. Gasket 202As, pretty much what I use on all these builds. I prefer just a paper gasket to a lot of the other offerings, but these fit ports really well on the sides and on the roof. And I got those glued, and I'm gonna set the intake manifold on. and let it sit overnight. Okay, so it's the next day, and our intake's been sitting on it overnight, so our gaskets are all nice and adhered to the cylinder heads. And what I'm going to do now is just mock up all the bolts in the intake manifold, because I don't want to get into a situation where, you know, I've got silicone and, you know, everything positioned, and then I don't have the right bolts to cinch it all down. So dry fit all of your intake bolts beforehand, because different intake manifolds have different bosses, you know, that you need different heights for. Cylinder heads could be made differently, so it may take, you know, some different bolts, some, you know, maybe a lock washer under on top of another washer or something to get the right length that you need to do. I use a stainless steel bolt kit from alloybolts.com, and it's alloy bolts with a Z at the end of it. You know, you pay $50 or so and you get a nice stainless bolt kit that comes with pretty much everything that you need. The intake manifold, timing cover, the oil filter adapter, oil pan bolts, valve cover bolts, your distributor bolt, you know, carb studs. It comes with everything. So just mock up everything, make sure it's all the right length, and I'm going to do that right now. I'm going to take a few minutes to do that, and then I'm going to don my camera using my newfangled camera vest holder thing, and we'll get this intake manifold on. Well, we're going to have to put the brakes on for right now. Without the bolts in, we've got a gap. But when I put the bolts in and draw the intake down, the gap pretty much goes down to about 5 or 10 thousandths, which I'm not comfortable with. So we're going to put this on pause for right now, and the intake end rails are going to need to be cut down a little bit, and to give us a little bit more room, so that under heat expansion or anything, that the intake doesn't stress itself. So I'm going to get that done, and hopefully next week will be the last part. We'll get the intake on, and water pump and the other things, and get this engine buttoned up. Thanks for watching. This is Brent with Lykins Motorsports. Be sure to hit the like button and the subscribe button, and I'll have many more videos coming up for you in the future. Thanks.